Hey you guys, this is Mrs. Yeagle, and today we are reading Addison Cooke and the Tomb of the Khan, chapter 31, which starts on page 309, and this chapter is called The Lance of Sir Frederick. When we left off, some sort of ear-splitting blast had just exploded in the museum, and I'm pretty sure Raj is to blame. Alarms blared throughout the museum. Screams erupted from the gala on the first floor. Boris Rhaegar, perhaps suspecting an air raid, dove to the ground and covered his head. There are times, Addison reflected, when life wildly surpasses all expectations, and times when the opposite was true. This was the former. Addison had no idea what caused the deafening blast that rattled the teeth in his gums. He didn't much care. Addison and Molly, both clutching the lance like firemen with a tall ladder, legged it for the exit. They nearly collided with Raj in the hallway. His hair looked a little darker than usual, and his eyes a little wilder. His clothes looked a bit singed, and he smelled like an egg that'd been forgotten on the fryer. He was trailing smoke. "Raj, what happened?" "It wasn't my fault," Raj said defensively. "I couldn't find the utility closet to shut off the power, so I thought it would just cause a short circuit." Addison, to his horror, saw flames licking from the balcony. He shouted over the din of fire alarms, "Raj, what did you do?" "I tore out all the electrical wires in the radiator. I destroyed the heating system." "Sure, it seems like a bad idea now, but at the time..." "Never mind," said Molly, checking nervously over her shoulder. She pulled her half of the lance toward the nearest exit sign. "We've got to run." "No," said Addison, jerking his half of the lance and stopping Molly in her tracks. "We can't have a fire in a museum. We have to stop it." Nobody and I don't know dashed in from an opposite hallway. "We heard your alarm and set off our own alarms," said the Mongolian girl. Addison realized that if firefighters arrived, they wouldn't know which direction to find the fire. He began to wonder if perhaps he should have spent more time formulating an actual plan. His thoughts were interrupted by the unwelcome sight of Boris Rhaegar bounding toward them like a bull in a cape shop. "Molly, nobody and I don't know? You guys know how to fight. Can you slow down Boris?" The black dark-haired were all business. They leapt into Boris's path and assumed fighting stances. Boris smiled. It was Molly who sailed in from the side and scored a punishing kick to Boris's shin. Addison spotted Eddie rushing toward them, his cheeks bulging with chicken kebab. "Eddie, you're okay!" Addison did not wait for any explanation. He struggled awkwardly with the heavy lance. "Help me with this thing!" Eddie jumped to his aid, and together they hobbled toward the balcony exit. Addison cradled his half of the lance in one arm while the other fished for his pocket notebook and pencil to trace Sir Frederick's clue. "What do I do?" asked Raj, pivoting in a confused circle. "You're going to put out that fire you started." Addison reached the balcony and saw it in flames. Reaching the exit door without getting singed was going to be the pig's whistle. Raj yanked a fire hose from the wall box in the hallway and cranked the spigot. The massive pressure of the hose jerked him off his feet. He clung to the hose like a bull rider, blasting jets of water in all directions except toward the fire. Black-tie guests in the gala below screamed as they were drenched under the sudden deluge. Raj's fire hose knocked over trash cans and blew the exit signs off the walls. Addison realized Raj was causing far more damage than he was preventing. "Raj, remind me to never allow you in a museum again." "It's not my fault!" Raj yelled, holding on to the flailing hose for dear life. Addison and Eddie dropped the lance as carefully as they could and dove to capture Raj's hose. Russian Vori were pounding up the main staircase. Addison directed the fire hose, blasting the Russians back down the stairs before turning the stream to douse the flames. Revelers in the gala below were showered by overhead sprinklers and occasional jets of freezing water from the fire hose. Molly and the black dark-haired had their hands and feet full fighting Boris. He seemed incapable of experiencing pain. It was like picking a fight with a Viking berserker. Boris focused all his attention on Molly. "This is for what you did to my brother!" He swung hard at Molly, who barely rolled out of the way in time. I Don't Know could kick only so high in her black dress and heels, but nobody kicked and punched at Boris as hard as he could. He might as well have been swatting a rolled-up newspaper at a bull rhinoceros. Each time Boris bellowed and charged, they could only scramble out of the way. "Who is this guy?" nobody asked. "Russian mafia," Molly gasped. "He's not fond of us." "What did you do to his brother?" "We kind of locked him up in a room. A doesn't sound so bad. You did the same thing to us. Well, the room filled with sand and suffocated him. I see. To be fair, said Molly, he was trying to kill us. Molly ducked a punch from Boris that shattered the drywall an inch above her head. As she wiped sheetrock dust from her eyes, she realized two things. One, she was not going to win this fight. And two, she didn't need to. All she needed was to lure Boris far from the lance, giving Addison a chance to escape. She decided to make like a wild goose and lead Boris on an epic chase. Molly called to the dark hag, "It's me he wants. He hates cooks." She fled across the balcony and downstairs into the center of the party. Boris barreled after her. To her annoyance, she realized she couldn't maneuver in the panicked crowd. Rhaegar's Vori surrounded her, gripping her arms in their fists. Boris closed in, rolling up his sleeves. From the balcony, Raj saw Molly being dragged across the atrium. He cupped his hands to his mouth and hollered, "Hang on, Molly!" He estimated the length of the fire hose and the distance to the floor and figured the hose would stop him before the floor did. He leapt up onto the balcony railing and thundered his war cry, "Bandari!" Gripping the hose pirate style, Raj leapt before Addison and Eddie could intervene. The pressurized hose snaked over the balcony, and to Raj's credit, it may have slowed his fall a tiny bit. It didn't really matter. Raj was aiming for the great fountain, and he nailed it. Addison gave the jump a perfect 10. The splash drenched tuxedo-clad onlookers, the press, and the Prime Minister of Mongolia. The mayor, diving for cover, hit the corner of a buffet table, flipping it over. Koi from the fountain flopped around in a puddle of shrimp cocktail sauce, getting their first taste of freedom, and horseradish. Boris's men were so astonished by Raj's leap, they momentarily forgot about Molly. She slipped their grasp, ducked through the legs of a diplomat's wife, and managed to fish Raj out of the fish fountain. Addison and Eddie jogged down the balcony steps, cradling the colossal lance. It jostled in Addison's arms as he frantically attempted to trace the French clue into his notebook. It was not his best work. He and Eddie galloped through the gala with an ungainly 10-foot object, smashing and knocking over flower vases and the occasional politician. Every time they turned to adjust course, high society guests were forced to duck or be walloped. The lance was knocking down more opponents in one night than in Sir Frederick's entire jousting career. "Eddie," said Addison, searching for a clear path to the front door, "you had one job. Don't leave your post." "That's true." "And yet, what did you do?" "I left my post." "The first moment you had a chance." "Well, it's like this," said Eddie, lifting his end of the lance to avoid clotheslining a fleeing throat singer. "When I get nervous, I get hungry. I didn't want to leave my post. I didn't set out to leave my post. And yet, there I was looking at the kebabs on the buffet table. And I thought, Eddie, don't go to the buffet table for a kebab. And I said to myself, I know, I'll go to the buffet table for a kebab. And here we are. Eddie, the next time we rob a museum, I will tell you to leave your post at all costs. Then you will most certainly fail to leave your post. That's a good idea. So what you're really saying is it's your fault. Yes, sighed Addison. I suppose it is. They were almost at the door, excruciatingly close to their freedom, when Boris stepped in the way. He grabbed the heavy lance with one hand and Addison with the other. He gripped Addison by the tie and proceeded to shake him like a paint mixer. Addison was not too proud to ask for help when he needed it. He reverted to his French accent. Help! This monster is attacking me! The museum security guard clutched Boris's arm. Don't hurt this boy. He's the ambassador's son. Boris punched the security guard with the closed fist that held the lance. The security guard collapsed, knocking Eddie off his feet in a chain reaction. Sacre bleu! Cried Addison. A second security guard rushed to the scene, astonished. Are you crazy? His father's the Prime Minister of China. Boris punched out that guard, too. Addison seized the opportunity to try one of the roundhouse kicks he'd seen Molly practice 100 times. It was harder than he imagined, and accomplished precious little besides upsetting Boris's rather delicate sensibilities. Addison decided that violence was not always the answer. The Russian gripped him by the throat. You must want to get hurt very bad. You mean badly, Addison corrected. Boris stared at him blankly. It's an adverb, Addison added helpfully. It modifies a verb or an adjective. The Vor punched Addison squarely in the stomach. You must be real stupid. Addison groaned and doubled over. Really stupid. Boris wrapped one giant paw around the back of Addison's neck and pulled him close. Remember the prophecy. I don't know the prophecy. Nobody's bothered to tell it to me, said Addison in frustration. Nobody overheard this, working his way through the crowd, and was momentarily confused. The last Templar gets the prize, said Boris. He hefted the lance in his paw and strode out of the gala, followed by his men. Addison, gasping for breath, watched him go. There was nothing he could do. The Ulaanbaatar Fire Brigade rushed into the gala carrying ladders. They were immediately followed by the Ulaanbaatar police, who arrived just in time to completely fail to stop Boris. The police assessed the chaos of the party with slack-jawed amazement. They had no experience with this sort of situation and had no idea whom to arrest. They had a rapid conversation in Mongolian with various gala guests. Addison couldn't quite follow the thread, but one by one, he noticed guests pointing at him, Eddie, Molly, and especially Raj. He also noticed nobody and I don't know slowly slinking out of the gala, turning tail and running. Before Addison could do the same, police tackled him to the ground, yanking his arms behind his back. This is an outrage, said Addison in his questionable French accent. This is an act of war against the great nation of France. You are under arrest for bombing this museum, said the police lieutenant. We'll take this up with the French embassy. Addison had no interest in provoking a Mongolian-French international conflict. He just wanted to talk his way out of handcuffs. Molly, Eddie, and Raj were handcuffed as well. This can't get any worse, said Eddie. Madame Feng stepped into the gala, followed by her courtier of guards. Addison groaned like a throat singer. Let them go, she announced. Addison pricked up his ears. Impossible, said the police lieutenant. These animals nearly destroyed the museum. Arrest them and book them if you must. I shall make their bail. In fact, Madame Feng said, pulling out her checkbook, why don't we just cut out the middleman? She signed a personal check and handed it to the portly museum director. The museum director was a short-statured man with a high-stature job. He glared at Madame Feng indignantly before deigning to read the check. He saw a 1, followed by so many zeros he nearly fainted. The museum director had his scruples, but he also had his price. Do you wish to press charges against these kids? Asked the police lieutenant. The museum director picked the nearest cocktail glass off the buffet table and downed it. He chased it with a second glass before finally finding his voice. The museum does not wish to pursue charges against these children, he said at last. The police lieutenant sighed, defeated, and he was so close to making his quota this month. Excellent, said Madame Feng. The children are coming with me. Addison could not help but admire Madame Feng's efficiency. Within seconds, his handcuffs were gone, and he found his wrist clamped in Hu's vice-like grip. I want to thank everyone for a lovely party, said Addison before he was hauled out of the gala. He still couldn't see Madame Feng's angle. Addison doubted she had suddenly become a good Samaritan. She enlightened him as her triads marched his team toward her waiting passenger van. The Russians have the lance, but I know you saw it first. I know the next clue is rattling around in that little Cooke brain of yours, and you are going to give it to me. I'm afraid I have no idea what you're talking about, Madame Feng, said Addison smoothly. My friends and I were just here to enjoy the throat singing. We'll see whose throat sings last. Madame Feng pivoted on her high heel and climbed into the front of the van. Addison gave her last comeback a B- at best, but she did manage to get the last word in. Hu duct-taped Addison's wrists together and moved on to Molly. I don't want to say I told you so, said Molly, but we probably should have come up with a stronger plan. Addison watched Hu duct-tape Raj and Eddie as well. Molly, everything is working out perfectly. They're taking us to wherever they're holding Aunt Dee and Uncle N. Fantastic! We'll get to share a cell with them, said Molly. Molly, relax. Sooner or later, you're going to realize that I have everything under control. The guards tossed Addison into the back of the van and slammed the doors. The van sped off into the dark streets of Ulaanbaatar.